Alright, it's been a hot minute since we did a commentary video, and what better way to come back than to do another tier list. I was looking at my old tier list video, it was kind of dookie. I put some good killers in bad tiers and some bad killers in some good tiers, so I'm here to redo it, plus with the new 3 killers, Twins, Blight, and Trickster, who weren't in my original tier list because they weren't out when I made it. We are going to get that started. Also, the new Resident Evil chapter is being announced on the 25th of the 5th year anniversary. Oh my god, we about to have a loaded month. Starting off on the S tier, we have Nurse. I mean, everyone saw it coming. One of the best killers in the game with the best abilities and probably the highest skill ceiling in the entire game. Add-ons are dookie, perks are decent, and overall she is just a really strong killer, can do some excellent mind games. And yeah, there's not really any other killers that can do what she does. So S tier all the way. Next up we have Spirit. Spirit is another one who is an extremely strong killer. However, it can be argued that Spirit takes a little bit more skill than Nurse, mainly because Spirit's power relies heavily on the usage of sound. That's where you see a lot of Spirits run perks like Strider and some other tracking perks here and there. Sound is an extremely important part of making Spirit work. Also, her ability can be categorized as a mobility type power because she does move extremely fast with some certain add-ons, allowing her to get across the map pretty quickly. Overall, Spirit S tier, plus her passive phasing is annoying. Saw a lot of people acting a little bit strange when I put Oni in the S tier, and I still stand by it. Another killer with a mobility type power. His Demon Dash can get around the map pretty quickly, plus he has the insta down with his big stick. So again, pretty cool killer. Isn't as strong as Spirit or Nurse because his power isn't as complex and it's pretty easy to get a hang of, but overall still, I think he's still S tier. Next up we have Blight. Blight was a really interesting one because back on the PTB he was pretty bad, but now he is one of the strongest killers in the game. His Rush and Lethal Rush can do a lot of things that people weren't really aware of when he first came out. Some new strategies and techs came along since Blight was, found out by the higher skilled killers, and he hasn't really received any nerfs. If anything, they just nerfed some of the techniques you could do with Blight, but with the new patch to make him more playable on controllers, they kind of made it so that he's about able to do what he was able to do before. All in all, that with the added fix of his height being now what it's supposed to be, Blight is extremely strong. Going down to the A tier killers that I think are just good. First up we have Huntress, of course a ranged killer with pretty much no gimmicks, only gimmick being her slower movement speed and her lullaby replacing her terror radius. Other than that, her hatchets, 2 hatchets to down a survivor, plus they nerfed Iridescent Head, which was arguably one of her strongest add-ons, so obviously that brings her down from a potential S to just a high A, so I'm going to give Huntress an A tier. Next up is Hag, arguably best teleportation power in the game. Her traps can be set off instantly teleported too, allowing for some insane plays. Plus, her shorter height can kind of make it so she's harder to see around loops. That is always an added bonus. And just the fact that she's an actual scary killer in a game that's supposed to be horror. A tier. Next up is Bubba. Back in my original tier list, this was pre-Bubba rework. I thought he was the worst killer in the game. Definitely D tier. I thought he was terrible, and the rework, it brought him high up. Now he has charges which allow him to use his chainsaw for a longer amount of time, which is really good for certain loops. He can just completely shut down loops like Shack and other loops on maps with pretty unsafe pallets. He is just a beast at basement plays, and just catching a group of survivors lacking has never been more satisfying than when you're playing Bubba. A tier. In my other tier list, I also put Freddy at like a C tier because I completely forgot about his ability to teleport to generators. that automatically brings him up to A tier. They attempted to nerf him recently, making his timer work in a different way, and I don't really know what else they changed about him, but he's still a pretty strong killer. Those traps can slow down survivors more than any other ability in the game, and those dream pallets are really good at tricking survivors who are asleep. That added bonus to the time thing does make his cooldown longer for his gen teleportation, but still the idea of being able to teleport to a gen after hooking somebody, especially with perks like Discordance, make him a very tough killer to go up against with little to no counterplay, so I'm going to give him a A tier. Next up is Plague, probably the most slept on killer in the game. If you max infect everybody as Plague and they choose not to cleanse because that is the most optimal counter to play, you can just easily M1 them. That, coupled with perks like Thanatophobia and Blood Echo, make Plague an insanely tough killer to go up against. Even if you don't cleanse against the Plague, she does have some add-ons that give her those red pulls right out the gate, so even if you try and do counterplay, she usually has a counter to that counter, which makes her a really good counter, so I'm gonna give her an A tier. Moving down to B tier, killers who I think are just decent. Up first, we have Demogorgon. Demogorgon was a pretty average killer prior to his buff, but his buff has turned him from average to above average. He's still pretty average, but he's above average. They made his shred easier to use, as well as changing some of his add-ons. I still think Rat Liver is one of his best add-ons, because that extra movement speed while charging of the Abyss definitely makes his shred ability really good. Plus, he has those portals, which, despite having cooldowns, can definitely give him a lot of map pressure, especially after hooking somebody. So I'm just going to give him a B tier. He isn't the best teleportation ability like Hag or Freddy, but he's fine. Plus the shred is just an added bonus. Next up is Doctor. Doctor can at times have the strongest ability in the game, able to shut down loops and shock survivors before they're able to reach pallets like Shaq and some pallets on Gideon. Plus his static shock, static blast, whatever you want to call it, allows him to track survivors extremely well. I think he has one of the best tracking abilities in the game. Just that static blast at the beginning of the match, especially on small maps with perks that increase his tear radius like Distressing. Doc is definitely one of the most annoying killers to go up against, but at the same time, he does have some pretty decent counterplay, so I'm just gonna have to put him down to a B tier. Next up, we have Ghostface, arguably one of the best stealth abilities in the game. Being able to hide your red stain mid-chase, as well as being able to crouch to lower his model to make him even harder to spot, Ghostface, I'm just gonna go ahead and say he does have the best stealth ability in the game. Of course, his main issue is how incredibly easy it is to knock him out of his stealth. Just having to look at him for like 2-3 seconds and being able to just completely ruin his plans, it's kind of dookie. Not to mention how without add-ons, his cooldown for Night Shroud is unbelievably long. That's just like 30 seconds being just a basic M1 killer with the ability to teabag. Definitely knocks him down to just a B tier. But again, hiding red stain, middle of the chase, pretty decent. Next up we have Wraith. Wraith is another stealth killer who automatically kind of beats out Ghostface with his ability actually being able to turn him invisible. But even after the buffs that increase his movement speed, and even after the buff that makes him invisible, like what he's supposed to be, Wraith still does struggle during some chases because of his cloak and his reappearance and his bell, which practically signals, hey, there's a killer behind you. In order to play him at his max potential, I would like to bring the add-on that makes his bell silent, because that's really the only good way to play Wraith, at least in my opinion. B tier. Next up we have Hillbilly, who was arguably one of the best killers in the game before he got nerfed and added that cooldown to his chainsaw. Despite the cooldown not really being that bad, what made Billy so bad after the nerf was the changes to his add-ons. What are these add-ons? These add-ons are garbage, especially since most of them have to do with a mechanic that most Billies will never even run into. I haven't really seen a single Billy overheat their chainsaw after the nerf, but hey, at least he got some cool chase music. B tier. Next up we have Deathslinger. The reason Deathslinger is this far low is because he's pretty inconsistent with his gun. His gun seems to have less range than what it leads to be. His hitbox for it is wonky. He walks as slow as Huntress and some other killers, which automatically puts him lower. Just slow killers in general tend to do more poorly than others, and plus his reload is pretty annoying. Not to mention how he's a tall killer with a short tear radius, so that added edge of him having a smaller tear radius than other killers is just instantly out the window because you can see his big ol' hat peeking out from behind a door, so B tier. Next up is Pyramid Head. I used to think Pyramid Head was pretty good, but that was back when people didn't know how to play against him. Now all you need to do is just avoid stepping in his trails and not falling for his extremely obvious ranged attack. The best thing about Pyramid Head is how efficient he is if you do get survivors who walk over the trails. Just the added bonus of instantly being able to kill someone or instantly being able to put them to a cage instead of having to pick them up and put them on a hook, and the ability to just completely destroy perks like Decisive Strike or Second Wind or even Breakdown. Just that alone makes him better than some killers. So I'm gonna put him at a B tier.
Oh, come on, man.
Now we're on to C tier, killers who I think are below average, just poor, not that good. First up we have Michael. Now in my original tier list I put Michael in the S tier. That was a move that I regretted because oh boy does Michael stink. He starts off the game, no tear radius, extremely slow, little to no lunge. He then has to waste time stalking survivors to go to tier 2, which is the tier that he will be in for a majority of the game. Only then does he have basic movement speed, basic lunge, but that's about it. He's just a Mem1 killer. Then he gets to tier 3, which of course he has to stalk survivors and waste time to do so, and only then does he get a longer lunge, bigger tear radius, and an insta-down. Effect that could easily be replicated by certain perks. The only good thing about Michael, I have to say, is some of his add-ons. They do have potential to make him a pretty fun killer to play, but other than that, he is pretty mediocre. C tier. Next up is Pig. Pig's only real redeeming quality is her ability to slow down the game and apply pressure like around mid-game. That's about it. Her traps are extremely RNG based, and that automatically brings her down to a low tier, which is a shame because I saw a lot of potential in this killer, but she's just completely RNG based. Survivors can remove traps off the first box. That is laughable. Not to mention how her crouch is one of the worst stealth abilities in the game because it makes her move slower, as well as having her get this really weak ambush attack that is extremely predictable, also has a sound cue like Wraith, and can only be good during certain mind games, but at higher ranks survivors tend to fall for mind games less and less, especially with such a predictable killer as Pig. C tier. Next up we have Clown. Clown, despite his buff, despite his rework, is still underwhelming. His yellow pee bottle, the speed boost you get for it, is barely noticeable, and nothing about his original bottle, the purple one, changed. It still slows survivors, it still blurs their vision, and the best counterplay towards him is throwing pallets early. So if anything, in order to do good against Clown, you need to play worse, because survivors would usually skip pallets and avoid throwing them early. But you have to actively play worse in order to do good against Clown. All in all, no map pressure, little to no mobility, no gen defense. That's about it. Clown, C tier. Underwhelming, very boring to go up against, and very boring to play. Next up we have Legion, and this is coming from a Legion main, so obviously I have a lot of love towards this killer, but even I can recognize when he is pretty bad. Legion's only ability is being able to injure survivors fast. Other than that, he has no ability to help him with chase, no ability to help him down. His Feral Frenzy can be used for mobility, but even then, it's probably the slowest mobility ability in the game. Even then, using Feral Frenzy to move quicker isn't really that good. Plus, his cooldown, oh my god, it stinks. You literally have to run add-ons like Cold Dirt in order to have Legion be semi-playable. Sure, injuring a chain of survivors at the beginning of the match may seem good, and some perks like Thanatophobia and Blood Echo can work on him as well, but it won't work as good as Plague, who her ability keeps them injured. And if they don't want to be injured, they just feed her more power. Legion doesn't have any of that. Legion, M1 killer, bad, C tier. Next up is Twins. Now, this can be a very controversial placement. I see Twins being S tier for a lot of people. Frankly, I don't see it. The idea of playing two characters at once is really cool. Victor seems like a cool character. Twins seems like a cool character. But I can't get behind it. Victor is incredibly easy to juke. Literally just run Shack and Victor becomes basically unusable. He can't go through windows. They added the ability of him to close lockers, but even then, if a survivor is all the way across the map and you do trap them in a locker, you won't be able to run there as Charlotte fast enough to even gain anything from it. I can certainly see why people would put her as an S tier, but me personally, through my experience with Twins, even after the nerfs and buffs and the tug of war that devs had deciding whether or not they're good or not, I have to put Twins in C tier. I just don't see what other people see in her. If they can convince me otherwise, then sure, but as of right now, Twins is a C tier for me.
You think you're the shit. You think you're so high and mighty. You're literally comparing yourself to a god.
Now we're at D tier. D tier is killers I just think are terrible. First up, Trapper, which is a shame. Trapper was originally my main when I first got the game. I thought Trapper was amazing until I realized he's pretty bad. No map pressure, no gen defense, no chase potential, nothing. All he has is bear traps that can be disarmed, bear traps that can be spotted from a mile away, bear traps that, if placed in predictable areas like at pallets and at Shack, can be disarmed. That's the main thing about Trapper. His ability can literally be negated by survivors pressing a button. Trapper does have some potential for like basement builds, but other than that, he has little to no base kit, and they have really done nothing to make him better. D tier. Then, my pick for the worst killer in the game. Trickster. Even after his buffs, even after the players cried out to the devs, he's terrible. Even after all of that, Trickster is still the worst killer in the game. A ranged killer who doesn't know how to be a ranged killer. A literally home bargain version of Huntress. Huntress, throw 2 hatchets, the survivor is down. Trickster, you have a pool of 40 knives to hit them 8 times twice. Now, why does Trickster have such a big amount of knives if it doesn't take that many to down survivors? Well, that's because the devs added this stupid recoil and spread thing to him to make him even harder to play. They give you this many knives because they know you're gonna miss a good chunk of them. In order to play Trickster well, you need to practically be behind them, sniffing their back to make sure that knives don't miss. They even added buffs to lower the recoil. If anything, why do you need recoil in the first place? It's such a stupid design choice. Main Event is the worst ability in the game. The windup is way too long and the payoff is slim to none. There's almost no payoff for using Main Event. You're better off forgetting about Main Event. You might as well just remove it from the game. It's so bad. Not to mention how he's a slow killer. Slow like Huntress. Slow like Deathslinger. Why make him slow if he already has such an underwhelming power? That just adds insult to injury. Trickster is garbage. Anyways, that's my tier list. I wanted to get this out because I wanted to do Blight, Twins, and Trickster before the new Resident Evil chapter is announced on the 25th, because I'm pretty sure after that live stream there's going to be a PTB, and then I'm going to have to make a video about it, get my first impressions, going to have to sit through that 30-minute queue to get one game, and I just want to see what the killer looks like, want to see how he plays, want to see what his power is before I make a completely new tier list, which even then I might not do. I might just tell you where I'd place him during the video where I play him. And I will see you on the 25th when they do the live stream. Other than that, I hope you all enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed and want to see more videos just in general like this. Maybe not. You're gonna do some gameplay soon. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.